Hi guys, Bible Talk with Rob Foster here on my little channel. Remember to subscribe and press the bell icon. So we saw that some of the people went to Egypt and some went to Europe and whatever. And we see that Abraham was called out of Ur, and eventually his descendants went to the different parts of the world. And now we want to talk just about how Israel became a nation in a nutshell. Basically, Moses grew up with his own mother looking after him, and she'd put him in the Nile River in a basket to save him from the edict of the king to kill all the male born. That was the devil's plan to eradicate the Messiah's blood lineage. So Moses then saw a man killing, or he saw two guys fighting, and he killed the one guy, which was an Egyptian. And although he was the prince to the Pharaoh, he was forced to flee. And he wandered in the wilderness for a number of years until he came across the burning bush. And God said to him from the burning bush, I want you to go and rescue my people. I've heard their prayers. Another type of Pharaoh came up after the one that looked after the people in Egypt. I think 400 years they were there. And so another type of Pharaoh arose, and he didn't like them, and he wanted them eradicated. So God heard their prayers, and he sent Moses. And Moses said, but Lord, I'm not a man of eloquent speech. Who can I go and who shall I say that sent me? So God said to him, take your brother Aaron and tell them that ego eimi, in other words, I am that I am, has sent you. So Moses went and asked the Pharaoh to let them go. They didn't want to. He didn't want to let them go. So Moses brought on them the 10 plagues, which are very similar to the 10 plagues in Revelation. So it starts the same in the book and it almost ends the same way with the different plagues. So eventually he rescued them, and they crossed the Red Sea, and they went to Mount Sinai, which is in Arabia, and they dwelt there for a number of years. After, I think, 2 years, they sent out spies to check out the land, and they came back with negative reports, and they said, no, these people are huge. We are like locusts to them, and they're going to eradicate us because they're so big. Remember, there were giants in the land in those days, and they grew much older and much bigger than normal. So Moses and Aaron brought the plagues upon Egypt, and then the lastborn, or the firstborn of the people, was slain in the last plague. So the Pharaoh capitulated and he let the people go. So that's when they had the Passover meal that was done in haste. They didn't have time for the bread to rise, so they ate unleavened bread. Leaven is like sin, it puffs up the whole loaf, just like sin in our lives that makes us all proud. So they didn't have time to let the bread rise, so they were commanded to roast a complete lamb, consume the entire thing, because they were going to leave in the early hours of the morning. So which they did, and they crossed the Red Sea, and at Mount Sinai later they were camping there, and Moses struck the rock, because the people were complaining about water and stuff. So he struck the rock, but he struck the rock twice, which disqualified him from entering the promised land, because it meant in fact that our Redeemer, Jesus, would have had to be struck twice. So he destroyed in effect the typology of God that he was going to use. So after the wilderness, it took Joshua to lead the people in across the Jordan into the promised land, after they spent another 38 years wandering there after their negative report. They finally sent out more spies, and they brought a positive report. So Joshua led them in, and they conquered the first city they conquered there was Jericho. Joshua means the same as Jesus, or Yeshua. It's the same, or Yahshua. The name Yah is God, and Shua means save. So the name Yahshua for Jesus means God saves. So that was under theocracy, when the people were under God as a king. But they complained, and they wanted a human king that they could see. Just like they complained about Moses taking too long up Mount Sinai. So they wanted a human king, and God gave them Saul. Now Saul was a failure as a king. He said, this guy's going to tax you, he's going to take of your wives and daughters to work for him and everything, and you're gonna regret having a human king. But they didn't listen, and they wanted it. So the situation changed from a theocracy to a monarchy, where they had their own king. So from Joshua, they formed the judges, who were to decide upon the people when they had arguments and things. Then it went on to King Saul. He reigned for 40 years. David was anointed king, but he had to wait 15 years before he was anointed. And he also reigned 40 years. Then his son David, Solomon, also reigned for 40 years. This goes from Exodus 14 to 1 Kings 11. So they conquered Canaan. Jerusalem and Solomon's temple was built. Because David sinned with Bathsheba and he murdered her husband, he wasn't permitted to build the temple. Although they did have the wilderness, they had the temporary tabernacle, which they could pick up and move like a tent. So they went on to reigning under Solomon, who was the wisest man apparently that ever lived. But he couldn't have been so wise, because he had 700 wives and 300 concubines, which were like sex toys. So if you take that, it's 1,000 women. That's 1,000 mother-in-laws. Oh, wow. Let's talk about punishment for all that sin. But now, if he had 1,000 women, how long would it take before he got to sleep with each one of them? They would rotate. He wouldn't see them for some years. But that's where we end the story today. And I thank you for joining me on my little channel, Bible Talk with Rob Foster. And I'd like you to subscribe to my channel, press the little notification icon, the little bell, so that you can get notified when there are new videos coming out. I try and do as many of these as possible at a time, and then I upload them over the next few days. It takes me longer to upload them than to make them. So this one is 7 minutes 46. It's going to take me at least 20 minutes to edit it. So enjoy today, and we'll talk again. Bye-bye.